I know. I said that I wasn't going to make any more videos, just release the ones that we were already editing and had ready to go. But there's a thing that's happened that I think we really need to be able to discuss today. It's something that President Donald Trump said yesterday, and I think it needs tackling head on because it's really important. It has the potential to do a lot of damage to the world of cleaner, greener, safer and smarter transportation, not to mention clean energy generation as well. I'll come to that in a second. But first, if you haven't already turned off, I want you to just bear with me until the end of this video. Yes, I know. We try, wherever possible, to leave politics out of this video. And I know that there are people who watch this channel who think that President Donald Trump is doing a great job and support his policy decisions and support his leadership. I know there are people who watch this channel who think the exact opposite. And I don't think it's a secret that I probably veer quite hard towards the latter group there because of some of the policies that have impacted me as an out, loud, proud transgender lesbian that President Trump has brought in, or policies that he's changing that affect, if not my life, but also the lives of people that I care deeply about. And again, I don't want to discuss that here in this video because what was said yesterday, I hope you'll agree, I really do, has the potential to have such a big impact that it goes beyond political parties. I think this is a bipartisan issue and I think we need to take it head on. And even if you support the president, and that is totally okay, that's your right and your decision to. I hope that after watching this video, if you agree with my assessment of the situation, even if you support President Trump in other areas, that you will effectively go, hey, buddy, you're not talking much sense right now. I hope that you would have the courage to do that, regardless of which political party you're in. So let's get on with it. So yesterday, President Trump at an event, went off on a rant, quite literally a rant about wind energy. I'm going to read you a little bit of his speech here. At least I'm going to try to read a bit of his speech here. We'll have an economy based on wind. I never understood wind. You know, I know windmills very much. I've studied it better than anybody. I know it's very expensive. They're made in China and Germany mostly. Very few are made here, almost none. But they're manufactured tremendous, if you're into this, tremendous fumes. Gases are spewing into the atmosphere. You know we have a world, right? So the world is tiny compared to the universe. So tremendous. Tremendous amount of fumes and everything. You talk about the carbon footprint. Fumes are spewing into the air, right? Spewing. Whether it's in China, Germany, it's going into the air. It's our air, their air, everything, right? So they make these things and then they put them up. And he continued ranting about how wind turbines kill birds and how it affects the value of people's property, etc., etc. Now, this is not something that it's not kind of unexpected for the president. We've seen him say similar things before, but I want to join some dots here as to why maybe he brought this particular topic up. Now, as some of you may or may not know, he has a golf course in Scotland. He recently lost a court case in Scotland concerning an offshore wind farm. He campaigned against it and he was recently ordered, he was recently ordered to pay damages. Now, I'm guessing that President Trump is very upset about that and is lashing out at wind farms in general. Let's not forget that he is somebody who will act very aggressively if he feels that he has been wronged. A good example recently, he removed a particular brand of alcohol from his golf courses. It was whiskey. Removed Glenfiddich whiskey from his golf courses because some reason. I don't even know the reason. That's not particularly important. But what is important is that what he said yesterday is completely bogus. Now, I'm also going to lead you along this path of where he may have got this information from. So the Heartland Institute, which again makes... It's an organization based in the US. It's ultra-conservative, right-wing. It kind of sets itself up as a research stroke news publication, but really, honestly, it's just a mouthpiece for very ultra-conservative ideals. It's funded by lots of different organizations, including money that comes in, surprise, surprise, from people who are in the energy sector. And it posted something last week, December 13th, titled "The Dangerous Winds of Trying to Prevent Climate Change." And the lead is "Inconvenient facts show why wind energy is not renewable, sustainable, or climate friendly." And this is the article, okay? I'm going to link to it in the show notes because I think you may want to read that yourself. If you read that and then you watch President Trump's rant yesterday, you'll see there are some correlations there between some of the facts stated in there. So let's now go and deal with the reality of this. So factcheck.org is a great website, and it's a site that relies on donations to keep it running, a bit like Wikipedia. So if you want to support fact checking in that way, please do consider donating. It has an article on here, and it fact checked back in March 2018 some of the claims made at the time by then Secretary of the Department of Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke. Claimed at that point that, quote, carbon footprint on wind energy is significant, and then claimed that as many as 750,000 birds a year are killed by wind turbines. Now, that was something else that President Trump said yesterday. Millions of birds, or large numbers of birds. I can't remember exactly what he said, so don't quote me on that. But this article quotes sources and fact checks and points out that coal's carbon footprint, remember, coal is still something that President Trump supports and is working hard to effectively bring back under the auspice of generating American jobs and having energy independence. The reality is, though, the coal industry is in not a great place. We just had Robert Murray's coal firm. He declared bankruptcy, and last week there were news stories suggesting that even while he was in the throes of running out of money, Murray was still funding climate denier science, or climate, I don't even like using the word science, climate denier, I suppose propaganda, maybe. So let's put that to one side as well. Let's go back to the fact checking here. Coal has a carbon footprint almost 90 times that of wind energy, and natural gas is about 40 times the carbon footprint of wind energy. And that even exists, and that even does take into consideration the life cycle analysis. Now, if you, there's a really nice chart here on Wikipedia, and again, it's cross-checked using the IPCC. So it's actually using a table from the IPCC global warming group, and in 2014, you can tell I'm not really awake yet. In 2014, the IPCC did a little report based on the global warming potential of selected electricity sources. And so what it did was it compared the life cycle carbon dioxide equivalent, and I'm reading this to make sure I get it right, including the albedo effect from selected energy supply technologies. Now, it gives us a minimum, a maximum, and a median value for these wind and other generation technologies. Coal is at the very highest, with a minimum of 740 grams of CO2 equivalent, sorry, let me say that again, 740 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour equivalent of energy at the other end. So if the electricity that you get out of coal at the wall from a coal-fired power plant has a carbon footprint at the best case scenario of 740 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour that you pull. At worst, it's 910 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour that you pull out. Wind, onshore wind, maximum carbon footprint is 56 grams of CO2 per equivalent kilowatt hour that you pull out of it. That's the worst case scenario. Best case scenario for onshore wind is 7 grams of carbon dioxide per equivalent kilowatt hour. Now, if we then go to offshore wind power, it's even crazier. It's 35, worst case scenario, 35 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. Or best case scenario, it's 8 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. Obviously, nuclear power still has the theoretical lowest carbon dioxide emissions per kilowatt hour, but obviously there are other things that you have to take into consideration, such as irradiated byproducts, waste, etc., etc. So let's go back to President Trump's claim that carbon footprint of wind turbines is terrible, and that they use a lot of heavy metals, and they use a lot of steel and all of these other things that need to be taken out of the ground and refined. And yes, when you are constructing a large wind turbine, you do use a lot of materials that you have to take out of the ground. And just like you would if you were mining for coal, you're taking a lot of stuff out of the ground. You have that heavy mining machinery, just like you would if you're bringing other minerals and materials out of the ground. Now, obviously, refining those materials that you use in the wind turbine, that takes energy. And he's claiming, most of it is powered by coal, so therefore it's no better in terms of the manufacturing process. But here is another really interesting article that I want to bring your attention to. This is the life cycle analysis of wind turbine. I will link to it in the show notes. And I read this morning, and I'm just gonna pick out kind of the last bit here. It did a study, a life cycle study of your average 2 megawatt wind turbine. So that's a moderately sized, pretty big actually, wind turbine. It takes into consideration the fact that wind turbines, even big ones like that, are very often only operating at like 40% of maximum capacity, because wind power, etc., etc. Wind varies. Even if you can take all of that into consideration, it finds out that if you were to build this wind turbine, have all of the carbon emissions associated with taking the raw materials out of the ground, refining them, manufacturing, transporting, installing, servicing during their life, taking that wind turbine back down, and then sending all of that to a landfill. And the interesting thing about this analysis shows that even though wind is still one of the lowest carbon footprint energy generation methods we have today, we can even reduce that further by recycling the wind turbines that we make at the end of their life. According to this report, and again, I'll link to it in the show notes, 54.8% of the energy used to build the wind turbine can be recovered at the end of its life if you recycle it. And you can reduce the life cycle carbon dioxide emissions of that wind turbine by 55.4%. So just imagine that really low carbon dioxide emission per kilowatt hour generated that I previously talked about. Now imagine halving that. I think, therefore, you can understand that the president's claims about carbon emissions and toxic fumes is a little bit off-piste and very inaccurate. Yes, we all need to find better ways of pulling materials out of the ground. We need better ways of building things. We need to be more mindful of our resources as a planet. But when it's compared to coal, natural gas, petroleum, then it's still the lowest carbon footprint. It still has the lowest impact on the planet. And so if you're sitting at the dinner table with a relative in the next couple of days who sees President Trump's most recent rant as an excuse to bash on you and your electric car or wind turbines, hopefully you can put them straight. I've linked to all of the resources I've used in the show notes. I also hope that you have an honest discussion with them about how we can change the way we use energy, about the way that we get things out of the ground. Much like last week when we were talking about cobalt and people got really upset because we didn't mention petroleum, and by the way we did on Friday or Saturday's show. We still have to be accountable for what we pull out of the ground, and we all need to reduce our reliance on mining things out of the ground. We need to find more efficient ways of doing things. But that requires that we work together, rather than pointing fingers and saying, yeah, but they're worse. Keep evolving.